Studio Pupco Studios in Oklahoma City. You're watching The Press Row. I'm Jenny Carlson here with Barry Trammell. Time for Inbox, your email questions answered here on video. Barry, let's get right to it. This one comes from Larry. Larry says, from what I've seen from Notre Dame so far, OU should kick some tail. What do you think, Barry?
Let's hold out, Larry, just a little bit. Now, Notre Dame has, not been running roughshod over a decent schedule, but we saw last year Notre Dame's very physical. They can match up with the Sooners very well on the lines, and frankly, some of the Sooner optimism from the early going has been tempered when what we see with West Virginia. Sooners with a 16-7 win. I know Blake Bell was not quarterbacking that entire game, but West Virginia goes to Baltimore, gets smoked by Maryland 37-0. The truth is the Sooners are largely untested. So I think we have a pretty good idea of what Notre Dame is. I don't know that we know what OU is.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest question in my mind, Barry. And yeah, I haven't been overly impressed with Notre Dame either. They've played a much better schedule than Oklahoma has to this point. But to me, the bigger question is, what do we know about Oklahoma? And I'm not sure we know much about Oklahoma at this point. I like what they're doing with Blake Bell. I think their defense is ahead of where it was a year ago. But I'm not so sure we can say OU is great. I don't think they're a top 10 team. I don't know that they're a top 15 team at this point. So that to me is the bigger question, just not knowing how good Oklahoma is at this point. Let's go back to the inbox. This one comes from Mitch. Mitch says, OU should leave the Big 12. This is a losing conference. Based on long-term interest, get out.
Well, Mitch, your message is a little late. The barn door has sort of been closed, and the Sooners are inside, shackled together with the grant of rights. And the other thing about the Big 12 stinks. There's no doubt about it.
It stinks this year, Barry.
It's a terrible conference
this year. Yeah.
Last year it was so-so, but as recently as 5 years ago it was the best conference in America. Now I know it's undergone some transformations, but I think it'd be the better long-term solution is just get the conference elevated. Everybody, Texas get going, OU improve, TCU do what I think it's capable of. West Virginia find itself, Kansas State find some consistency, Texas Tech get back to where it has been and can be. So I think the Big 12 still has the potential to be a viable competitive football conference, be right there knocking on the door with everybody else at the SEC, but this year it does stink.
Yeah, let's be honest here. If you look around college football, you see a lot of conferences that are top-heavy. Even the SEC, the Pac-12. All of those conferences that have teams at the top of the ratings, if you look down, you're not going to find great teams in the bottom half of those leagues. And sadly, that's where the Big 12 is this year. Last couple years, it's been tough. Pretty much 8 of your 9 games, the exception being that game against Kansas, was probably a game you could lose if you were in the Big 12. This year, there's a lot more games. If you're at the top and you're looking at who you're playing, you're saying that's a win, that's a win, that's a win a lot more often this year. So this year, yes, it's down, it's not good, but leaving the Big 12, especially with all the TV money that the Big 12's got, Barry, OU doesn't want to leave, and neither does anybody else in the Big 12. All right, back to the inbox. This one from Kent. Kent says, 76 points for Ohio State, 72 for Louisville. Baylor has 70 in the third quarter. Sad excuse for football. Wow, good or bad for football, Barry?
I think it's terrible for football. I agree with Kent. It is a sad excuse for football when we're talking about the quality of opponents. Now, Baylor actually played a representative school. Louisiana Monroe played Baylor within 5 points last season. So, you give Baylor a little bit of slack, but Ohio State playing Florida A&M and Miami playing Savannah, having to shorten the game. What we're seeing with so many of these college football mismatches is, to me, it is just an indictment of the culture of the game. It's got to be fixed. We've got to find a way to have more competitive football on Saturdays, and you can't offer up the public just a diet of game after game after game, which are basically fixed fights. So something's got to be done. I don't see anything on the horizon right now to do it, though.
Now, if you talk about a lot of points, I think this is the new era in college football with offenses that are going crazy. You talk about Ohio State, Louisville, and Baylor all running these spread offenses, great quarterbacks, just what they've got going on. But yeah, when you're playing teams that are as bad as the opponents they were playing on Saturday, My hope is once we get into this college football playoff next year that you'll see teams schedule better in their non-conference, but still, we're only talking about four spots in the playoff. So I don't know if that's going to motivate teams to say, hey, let's schedule better in the non-conference or not. But we're starting to see the fans are not going. I mean, Barry, you look around at stadiums in some of these games, it's a lot more bare than it used to be. People are not buying tickets to games where they know it's going to be 76-0. They're just not going to go. All right, back to the inbox one last time from Andy. He says, who's going to be the next coach in Austin? Art Briles? Nick Saban says he isn't going, but if they park a Brinks truck in front of his house...
I think he's going to have the Brinks truck towed. I think that's what Nick Saban's going to do if they park it in front of his house. I don't think Texas can get Nick Saban. Saban said something interesting the other day. He actually addressed this and said, you know what? I'm too old to start over. And you're never starting over in Austin, but it is a rebuilding project. And frankly, I think it's possible that Saban has found his final place. He's a guy that sort of has the reputation for moving around, not long at Michigan State, not long at LSU, not long with the Dolphins, but definitely he's found his niche in Tuscaloosa. He's into his 60s. I would be surprised if he went to Austin.
I would too, but I think they're going to talk to him, and I think there's already evidence out there that they have opened up those communication lines. Sounds like a regent talked to his agent. You know, I'm not saying he goes, but I think they at least have to make an offer. They at least have to try, because in Austin you've got as much money as anybody in college athletics. You've got as fertile a recruiting ground as anybody in college athletics. So everything is right to go win. And I think if you look at that team, if you watch Texas play like a lot of us did on Saturday night against Kansas State, you saw a lot of good raw talent, but there's not a lot of good coaching going on. And so a good coach, I think, could turn it around pretty quick. Now, we've talked before, Barry, Art Briles is definitely on the list. I think John Gruden's on the list. You mentioned Charlie Strong. You mentioned David Shaw. I think one of those guys, surely one of our five, is the new coach at Texas.
You would think so.
I would think one of those guys would take the Longhorns job. Hey, be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.